Okay, so we're going to be cutting some carrots into different shapes using the bridge hold and the claw hold only. The knife is always going to go down towards the board and never towards us. Our first job though is to take our carrots and using the peeler, hold one end of the carrot and peel away from you, just turning the carrot as you go to remove all of the skin. Once you've got all the way around the first end, just turn it around and then you can peel the skin from the other ends. Once you've got all of the skin off, you're simply just going to cut both ends of the carrot off and repeat that with all three of your carrots. Carrots are all peeled. I'm going to get rid of the peelings now into the bin. Okay. What we're aiming to do is produce all 9 of these different cuts of carrot laid out exactly the same as the laminate onto our board eventually. The first one that I'm going to work on is the rondelle, which is just discs of the carrot. So taking a claw hold, I'm going to make sure that I'm starting off with it nice and level. I'm going to cut about 2mm thick slice down to the board with my fingers behind the knife, and I'm going to try and cut a few identical pieces like this. So that is my rondelle. Next one I'm going to work on is the quarter slice. I'm going to start off by having some rondelle, and then I'm going to take the pieces, and you might feel comfortable to do more than one piece at a time, and I'm going to simply with a bridge hold cut them in half. And then I'm going to cut each half into a quarter, and I'm aiming again for all of these pieces to be exactly the same size. The last one on the bottom row that I'm going to do is the diagonal slice. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to have to sacrifice a little bit of this carrot. I'm going to start off by cutting it on an angle like this. Okay, and I'm just pop that piece to one side. This is what it should look like. Now, when I cut a piece off, again, a couple of millimeters wide, you'll notice it goes into a long sort of diagonal. You see the difference between the two pieces. So I'm going to try and get a handful of identical pieces to show on my board. About 4 is probably enough. And they're quite nice, a little bit different if you're looking for a bit of a different shape. Right, moving on next, I'm going to do the top row next, which is the baton, the batonette and the julienne. What we're aiming for here is for all 3 of these to be really quite different in their width, but we want them to be exactly the same size. So I'm going to just cut the end off that. I'm going to start off with a piece, it's about 5 centimetres long, and I'm going to create a baton. The outside of this is quite circular, so my main aim is going to be to try and square them off. So with my fingers behind the knife, I've cut one of the curved edges off, place the flat side down on the board, cut off the next curved edge, flat side on the board, next curved edge, flat side on the board, next curved edge. Now I can have a look and see it's not perfect, so I'm going to just tidy it up a little bit until essentially it looks like a square on the end, but we've actually got it in the shape of a baton. Okay, and you can make more than one of those. So I'm going to move on now to my batonette. I'm aiming for this to be the same length as my baton, so this piece cut in half is going to be perfect. And we want to apply the same principle as we did with the baton, but make it a bit smaller, about half the size. So fingers behind the knife, I'm going to cut the curved edge off, just to get rid of that. And then I reckon about 4 millimeters for this one. I'm going to cut this piece down. Okay, so you've got a thin piece like this. I'm going to cut the curved edge off, and then when I cut into it now, can you see I've got a batonette? So it is similar to this one, but a bit smaller. Okay, quite a bit smaller, and I could improve that a little bit just by squaring it off. It looks a little bit more like a rectangle than a square if I look at it on the end. Okay, so put that piece on, and then I'm going to cut myself another piece the same. Okay, again, just aiming to square it off if I need to. So I've got a good difference in size between the baton and the batonette, and I want all of my batonettes to be exactly the same size. Moving on now to my julienne. This one's a little bit more difficult because I want it to be teeny tiny like a matchstick. So I'm going to use a bridge hold, carefully cut as thin thin a slice as I can down to the board. It's about 1 millimetre thick. And then using a claw hold, I'm going to cut down those towards the board, my fingers moving back out the way so I get these tiny matchsticks. These are my Julienne. Notice there's a good difference in size between the matchstick and the Julienne. If I put those in a row there, they're 3 very different sizes. Now, the principle of making the large dice, small dice and brunoise is simply you start out with a baton. To make the large dice, we cut that into a cube. Okay, so you will start out for your large dice with more batons, and that makes your large dice. For the small dice, we will start out with pieces that are like a batonet, and then we're going to square them off to make a small dice. And similarly, with the Julienne, for a brunoise, we're starting out with the Julienne, and then we dice it into tiny brunoise. And then we're going to present them all on our board so that they look identical to the laminate.